is back with us. Pete, what's the news?
Well, the news is that the federal judge in New York has said that this lawsuit can't be dismissed. Now, you may remember that she filed a libel suit against the president. She had claimed that he sexually assaulted her in a department store 25 years ago in New York. He said that was wrong, that was a lie. She sued him for libel. And the Justice Department said, nope, sorry, we're going to take this case to federal court, and you can't sue the president because he was acting in his official capacity, and there's a law that says you can't sue the government for libel. So the judge said that's wrong today. He said that's wrong on 2 counts. First, the president isn't covered by this law because it only applies to employees of federal agencies, and the president isn't one. Secondly, it only applies to employees acting in their official capacity. Now, the government's argument had been that when the president, speaking to White House reporters, denied this, he was acting in his official capacity because there's a public interest in knowing about the president's character. And the judge said today, nope, that has nothing to do with his official capacity. People might be interested in what happened, but that's nothing to do with the government's business. Now, if the government had prevailed here, Jean Carroll her lawsuit would, in essence, be a dead letter because you can't sue the government for libel. This keeps the lawsuit alive. I would think the Justice Department unquestionably will appeal this decision. For part of the reason is that no judge has ever determined before whether a president is a federal employee. This law has been applied to presidents in the past, but courts have just sort of assumed that presidents are covered by it. So this does seem to be a case of first impression where the courts are actually trying to struggle with who this law applies to.
Thank you for checking out our YouTube channel. Why don't you subscribe? It's really easy. Just click on that button down there. And for more news from MSNBC, click on any of these.
Привет! Добро пожаловать на канал Geek Brains. Здесь мы...
Вот может, you may guess. I just don't agree that yes. Actually, if I have my wife, I don't agree that anybody. Yeah, at least many people. Yeah, just yeah. But you got me. I guess so. Yeah. I don't care what they want. They can want anything. They're just happy. I can see. We punched. Yeah, maybe. Да. Ладно, не надо. So, yeah.
Мы разбираем самые волнующие темы из мира IT. Мы запускаем новую рубрику «Калейдоскоп профессий» в IT-направлении.
Dueling rallies in West Michigan this weekend, and both sides were heavily armed. A conservative group, the American Patriot Council, supporting President Trump with a freedom march. Justice for Black Lives staging a counter-protest. Both groups said they feared for their safety. Both groups blamed the other for stirring divisiveness. Both groups brought guns. NBC News Now correspondent Dasha Burns was there.
We are once again divided at election time. And I think this could be one of the worst elections in the last 100 years.
This is about freedom, and that's what this is about. This is simply about freedom for all.
That's a Trump rally. It's not patriots. Those people are supporting Donald Trump. It has nothing to do with patriotism.
For a long time, there was quite a few people who did not want to stand up. They were afraid of what the BLM, the Antifa, and the people who are not with Trump would do.
Every event that these people have shown at during this summer, they've brought arms, so they weren't there to engage or talk, and they racially intimidated us in June and July. And today we caught wind of their event, and we decided that it was our time to exercise our Second Amendment right.
Donald Trump, it has nothing to do with patriotism.
For a long time, there was quite a few people who did not want to stand up. They were afraid of what the BLM, the Antifa, and the people who are not with Trump would do.
Every event that these people have shown at during this summer, they've brought arms, so they weren't there to engage or talk, and they racially intimidated us in June and July. And today we caught wind of their event, and we decided that it was our time to exercise our Second Amendment right and to make sure that we have a safe space for our people.
I'm wearing my body armor today because I've had threats in my life, so I just don't feel comfortable coming out to gatherings like this unprotected.
We're fighting for equality. That is not division.
It's going to be what it's going to be. I mean, obviously I want Trump to win. I'm a Trump supporter, but if Biden wins, Biden wins. I mean, it's going to, the country's going to continue to go. I mean, it's not the end of the world.
Dasha joins us now from Grand Rapids, Michigan. It is a place she has been a whole lot over the past year for our County to County series. Dasha, thankfully you've reported that in spite of all of the guns, there was no violence there this weekend. But these hypercharged rallies really just highlight how polarized this area is ahead of the election. This is a county and a state that both candidates are trying very hard to win. What did you take away from this weekend there?
Hey, Allison, that's right. Thankfully, no violence. This scene that you just saw unfold happened in Allendale. It's just next door, about a 20-minute drive from Grand Rapids. And just to paint how surreal the scene was, in between these two dueling rallies with armed individuals on both sides, there was a family at the park playing pickleball. So Michigan just has a whole lot going on right now. And I think what we saw over the weekend was how the deep division is really manifesting on the ground here in this area that is so politically important and where tensions and stakes are incredibly high. Look, both of these groups were ideological opposites. On one side, you had a lot of Trump support. You had some militia members. On the other side, you had racial justice activists who brought security in the form of an anti-fascist organization that came with their own rifles as well. And both sides told me that they were nervous about what might happen. They were concerned for their safety. There was also a sentiment of feeling silenced in both groups that we talked to, individuals who wanted to stand up against that and said that they brought weapons so that they could safely do so, could safely exercise their rights. Allison?
Dasha, what else are voters there concerned about on the right and on the left as we head into this last week before the election? What issues are they talking to you about?
Well, of course, Election Day was not far from anyone's mind, and it was interesting. Both concerned about Election Day. On the right, there was more concern about protecting the vote. On the left, more concerned about protecting the voter. So at the American Patriots Council rally, there were folks looking to recruit poll watchers and challengers. At the Justice for Black Lives rally, people were signing up volunteers to be poll buddies, to take volunteers, to take voters to the polls who were nervous about intimidation, to have someone there with them. I want you to take a listen to what we heard from each group. Allison, watch.
I'm concerned that his followers are going to, if he's showing even a hesitation of winning, they're gonna respond with violence.
We are concerned about voter intimidation, especially in Michigan. Polling places are supposed to be sanctuaries. You're supposed to be safe at a polling place.
Are you guys interested in poll watching or challenging? Is that something that you're...
Something I already do. I did it in 2018 and I'll be doing it this year. So, and it's nothing against anybody. It's just, I want to guarantee the integrity of the election. And it's not like, oh, I think they're going to cheat as much as it is. I just want to make sure that every vote is counted.
And Allison, Michigan, of course, is an open carry state, but recently state officials banned open carry at the polls. However, there have been lawsuits challenging that order, and there are sheriffs in the state who say that they will not enforce that ban. Allison?
Dasha, impressed to see that in spite of the tensions, in spite of the concerns, in spite of the weapons this weekend, people managed to express themselves, and it didn't get violent and it didn't get nasty. It gives us some hope here that maybe we can get past some of this divisiveness. Dasha in Grand Rapids, thank you.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel.
Joe Biden, meanwhile, 1 week out from Election Day, will be in the state of Georgia. The first time as the Democratic nominee that he'll be there. First to Warm Springs, which, as you know, served as Franklin Delano Roosevelt's retreat from 1924 through his 12 years as president before making his way to Atlanta. Will Vice President Biden for a drive-in rally. Georgia remains neck and neck in the latest polling. We told you yesterday about the AJC poll that has Biden up 47 to 46 within the margin of error, plus or minus 4 points. In Wisconsin, the latest Reuters Ipsos poll shows Joe Biden ahead by 9 points, 53 to 44. In Pennsylvania, that same poll finds Biden leading by 7 points, 51 to 44. And in Texas, the latest New York Times Siena College poll puts President Trump ahead by 4 points, 47 to 43%. Let's bring in national political correspondent for NBC News and MSNBC, Steve Kornacki. Steve, let's start in the state of Georgia, if we could. It's pretty extraordinary that the Democratic nominee for
Да, мам, привет. Ты чё? Ясно, понял. Ага. Ладно, понял. Чек, сори. Чек, профессор, поставлю 63, 4. Ладно, все нормально у тебя, да? Ладно, давай так. Мама. Ridiculous painter. We are not really good people, yeah. No, we are okay. Not really good. It's okay. Nobody is perfect, I guess. But somehow, some way yes. Yeah, people say if you are sick, it's you're not really good. Yes. Yeah, you don't respect many things, yeah. Well, yeah, I don't think. I didn't say that you have to die. I still said you have to practice. The law, better and forward. To train. If you're a man. If you're a lady, you have to be healthy. And pregnant, yeah, sometimes. Yes, very nice. Это не русский культура. Ой, ой, we are опять victims. Till the end. Like no wouldn't be like a woman. I'm so healthy. Наоборот, Нет, human race, blah blah blah. Okay, then go make your heart. Practice it. Inner spice. Just the same. Specialist. Professional. Ну не важно, он говорит уже сам. Нет, он тебе говорит. Anything, но я понял, наоборот, так. Наоборот, ну нам, да. So it's, I think, yeah. It's up to you. Ну, yeah. I just do this. Okay. Everything is good, то, что ты health, да. Все здоровье только понимаете, да. Only health. No, protect, no, nothing. So, да. If you're Yeah. It may sound stupid, but terrific. Oh, fine.
For president 1 week out is in Georgia, of all places.
I don't agree that you love women, and that's why you have to work and you have to have so on. Yeah. I just don't. Yeah. It's not true. Yeah. It's not nice. Да. Ну, не будем. Позавидовать, да.
What do you make of the numbers in that state? How have they moved?
Are good. Even the barman who even drinking all the time. Because the working out. No, yeah. Be better. Go, yeah. Shop and go. Take a nap. And they need you. The guy who is in this what is the meaning of this profession? What do you really want in it? What do people may want in it? Yeah? Why and so on and so forth, yeah. And make it better, and yeah. There is no other ways, as I would say. It is the only normal way. It is the only natural way, maybe. It is the only way to, yeah. Ну да, я понял, ладно. Ну нет. So take a rest, of course.
Moved lately.
Yeah, I mean, you put it up there, that's roughly consistent with the
I understand it. We are sick and tired. We are weak.
polling average. I think one way of looking at this here, here's the road to 270. Every state that you see in gray here, that includes Georgia. These are states that Trump carried in 2016 that look like they are parts of the battleground in 2020. There's varying degrees of trouble for Trump on this map. You've put up a Wisconsin, a Michigan, even a Pennsylvania.
Занимайся, make your health, yeah, make your health better, yeah.
Yeah, those are the three states in this grouping where his numbers are the weakest right now. You know, a state like Texas is looking competitive, but Trump's poll numbers are better there than they are in the Midwest. But basically, the way to look at this map, at least the way that I do, is there are a couple states here that you see as blue: New Hampshire, Minnesota, and Nevada. These are states the Trump campaign has talked about flipping. Blue states Clinton won in 2016. They've talked about flipping.
So you don't have a choice, actually. Just do better. Do better. And don't survive. I don't think so. I'm convinced that there is meaning in all professions. It's the simplest. It's not a profession. I mean, for money. Yeah. Some things really cool, sacred. Some meanings to be interested. Да.
You're not seeing it in the polls right now, so barring that, barring Trump's ability to flip one of those states I just circled, it is all about Trump playing defense in these states right here. We took you through it the last time I was on a few days ago. If he just loses, Trump does, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, that would put Biden over 270. A loss in a state like Georgia, for instance, I could just show you, if that were ever to turn blue, you see Biden would be then sitting at 248. And then if you just went through the Midwest here, there's Wisconsin, there's Michigan. Even without touching Pennsylvania, a state like Georgia +2 in the Midwest would put Biden over 270. There are scenarios here for Trump. We can get into them. But the bottom line is he is playing defense in an awful lot of places here with a week to go.
So, Steve Kornacki, let's talk about election night. A lot of people are talking about, hey, we're not going to know.
То есть это что, сговор прессы, что ли? Просто они не любят, я понял, или просто деньги. замечаешь, что и меня не касается. А что они не показывают другой вариант? Когда? Ну как-то так, это да. Предвзятое мнение, ну как-то да. Не знаю.
The outcome of this race for, a month, maybe 2 months. But on election night, we're going to learn fairly early, maybe even by the end of the evening, what's happened in Arizona, what's happened in North Carolina, and of course, what's happened in Florida. I mean, we're going to know most likely by 9 p.m. with all the early votes counted in Florida. We're going to know the shape of that race by 9 p.m. See how fascinating that's going. If Joe Biden wins any one of those 3 states, and if we assume what the 2 campaigns have assumed, that Biden has Wisconsin and Michigan locked down, is that enough for Joe Biden?
Yeah, take a look at a couple different scenarios here. You mentioned Florida, right, and how it'll work outside the panhandle, basically 7 o'clock Eastern. In that first half hour, we think we're largely going to get the early vote and the mail-in vote, and then the same-day vote not that long after. If past is prologue here, you're going to come in for Florida. At 7:30, you're going to get North Carolina. I'll add another state here that I think you're going to get substantial results from. That's Ohio. The polls close at Ohio at 7:30 in Ohio. Unlike a lot of these other states we're talking about in the Midwest, they do allow the processing of ballots ahead of time. That's a process that's underway in Ohio. So there's the potential to get a readout from Ohio. As you say, late at night, we might get something from Arizona. Texas might be producing numbers too. Again, look, if you start with Michigan and Wisconsin going blue. I know the Trump folks will contest that at this point, but just for the sake of playing out these scenarios, if you start with Michigan and Wisconsin going blue, a Florida would certainly put Biden over the top. We just said a Georgia would put Biden over the top. A North Carolina would put Biden over the top. If you get out west in Arizona by itself, that would not put Biden over the top. You see, that would put him at 269 on the cusp of things. When you see that, that's when you need to start talking about this. Nebraska, they do the electoral votes by congressional district. Notice that one of these is gray here. 2nd Congressional District of Nebraska, it's basically Omaha. Trump barely hung on there in 2016. He won it by about 3 points. The polling that's available there suggests Trump's probably an underdog there right now, if anything. So if you gave that to Biden, again, that would get him to 270. We didn't touch Florida. We didn't touch Arizona in this scenario. That's what we mean about a lot of paths. When you're ahead 8 nationally, there are going to be a lot of potential paths.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos. The latest installment of the New York Times series on Donald Trump's tax returns reveals that his charitable givings appear largely self-serving. What a shock. Trump's financial records show that much of the charitable commitments came from land deals that offset his income. The paper writes this, quote, the vast bulk of his charitable tax deductions, $119.3 million worth, came from simply agreeing not to develop land, in several cases after he had already shelved those development plans. Meanwhile, Global Citizen reports that during the pandemic, billionaires' fortunes reached a total of $10.2 trillion. That's the highest amount of money ever owned by the world's wealthiest. At the same time, the pandemic caused global poverty rates to rise for the first time in 20 years. With that in mind, as Forbes to rise for the first time in 20 years. With that in mind, as Forbes unveils America's 400 list of wealthiest people, for the first time, it's changed the way it measures philanthropy as part of the ranking. Let's bring in Chief Content Officer for Forbes, Randall Lane, CEO of Global Citizen, Hugh Evans, and chairman of the board of directors for Global Citizen and a managing partner at CVC Capital, Chris Stadler. Thank you all three for being with us. Randall, why don't you start out telling us the new way Forbes is ranking America's 400 wealthiest individuals?
Well, you hit it, Joe, with what's going on with the reports today. It's about fairness, and that's what you're seeing. You know, a lot of the political tumult and a lot of the resentment of how success. You know, we have billionaires, American billionaires, that made about $700 billion since the bottom of the pandemic as the market's gone up. And so what we're doing now, we've been measuring philanthropy since 2018, is that now we're now measuring based on how much you're actually giving today to help the problems of today, not to park in a foundation, not to put in a donor-advised fund and that's myopic and nobody can see what's going on with it, not to pledge, but to actually put money to solve the problems of today.
Candy K.
Hugh, I was just, on the whole question of philanthropy, we've all seen the numbers of how much billionaires have made. But if we live in a world in which we rely on those billionaires to give a proportion of their income to help the neediest, I mean, isn't that fundamentally a problem? Wouldn't it be much better to be focusing on shoring up a robust social safety net so that we weren't at the mercy of the whims of a billionaire who wants to give this year and then perhaps doesn't want to give next year?
Well, I think ultimately, Kathy, you touch on a really important point that if we're going to address extreme poverty, we need to look